navigating the business environment in the transition year. My name is David Okwara. I am the Marketing and Corporate Communications Lead for KPMG Nigeria. And this event has certain thematic areas to be considered, around the areas of the keynote speech and the panelists, which makes this event a spectacular one of which is the macroeconomic outlook for 2023 and the imperatives for Nigerian businesses. The next is the 2023 Finance Act and its implication for businesses. And last but not the least is the 2023 budget and businesses across key sectors. But before we go into the action of things, I'd like us to respect our land, give a quick tribute to our land by reciting the national anthem. I know a lot of us cannot remember some certain keywords, including myself. I think this is an opportunity or a refresher for me to remember those words as it's being played. So please, as we play the national anthem, please sing along at your spaces. Thank you. Okay, it's taking a little time to come up, but please pardon us. We will play the national anthem. Okay, I think we're having a bit of a technical challenge here.
I don't know if you can see, if I can hear it.
Okay, I think.
Sorry, let me just restart it. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam President.
Good afternoon, Professor Natofo.
How are you, ma'am?
Fine, thank you.
Sorry, I'm coming in a little late. I had challenges logging in. It required me to go and register again.
Okay, we are live now.
Good afternoon, Professor Nat. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How are you?
We understand. Thank you very much. A lot of us are having challenges here, but it's very typical of the networks that we manage, especially when we have virtual events as such. So I'm sure everyone will understand that, but in due time, we will get on board very quickly and we will start to cruise this webinar. But if we're unable to play the national anthem at the time, I think we can get with the program quickly and move on to the introductions of the invited guests and recognitions duly. Can you give us some? Yes, please.
Please go ahead with the introduction, David.
Yes, so we are quickly uploading a screen so that we can have a visual experience of what we're doing. Okay, so first, I would like to introduce the keynote speaker, Tola Adeyemi. Tola Adeyemi is the Regional Senior Partner and Chief Executive of KPMG Nigeria and West Africa. Tola has over 33 years of extensive experience in the provision of audits and related advisory services, process reviews, due diligence reviews, SOX implementation, working as reporting accountant and IFRS conversion services. He has also been involved in providing privatization support and monitoring services as well. Tola has lived and worked in the UK, South Africa, and Nigeria, and is a regular speaker on contemporary accounting issues and the likes. Tola is a regular speaker on governance issues and governance matters as well. But unfortunately, Tola will not be here today. But however, he's ably represented by Tomi. Tomi is the partner and head enterprise risk and ESG services at KPMG Nigeria. She also provides oversight on ESG and the Board Governance Center. She's a highly skilled executive and has accumulated over 25 years of professional business advisory experience delivering quality services to national and multinational businesses on various assignments across key industries. Tommy holds a BSc in Chemical Engineering from the University of Benin and is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Nigeria, ICANN, and a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. Next, we have Professor Nat Ofor, who is a professor of corporate law and governance at the Department of Business Law, College of Law, Nigerian University, Edo State. He's a fellow and the immediate past president of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, and remains a member of its governing council. He is also a member of the board of the Institute of Internal Auditors, IIA, at the Institute of Directors, IOD Nigeria. He is a fellow and a member of its executive committee. He was a member of the board of the Association of Professional Bodies of Nigeria. And very quickly, I'll just go through the list of other panelists and speakers that we have here today. Dr. Mrs. E.J. Jidena, FIOD, President and Chairman of Council, IOD Nigeria. We also have Dr. Muda Yusuf, Founder, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. We have Mrs. Umar Yusuf Aboki, Commissioner, Planning and Budget, Kaduna State. We have Mr. Theophilos Emowa, Partner, Alex Legal Firm. We have Dr. Ayoteriba, CEO, ECONO0MIC Associates. We also have Mr. Dele Alimi, MIOD, DG CEO of IOD Nigeria. And lastly, but not the least, we have Bigbe Afolabi, who's going to be moderating the panel session of this event. She's a partner and internal audit, governance, and risk and compliance for KPMG in Nigeria. So that having said that, we will move on to other areas of the event. I will quickly move on to other sides of the event. If you give me a moment. Okay, so now I will quickly move on to introducing, I've already mentioned, Dr. Mrs. E.J. Jidena, FIOD. She is the president and chairman of council, IOD, to come in and give the opening address. I know I didn't give all the accolades during my introduction with all the profiles, but I'm sure Dr. Jidena might be able to, give the accolades herself when she opens this event. So Dr. Jidena, I'm opening the event for you to come in and give us the grand opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okwara, for this grand opening. And it's a great delight that we are working together with KPMG today. So members of the Governing Council and past presidents here present, the Chairman, Research and Advocacy Committee, IOD Nigeria, Professor Nat, our keynote speaker, Mr. Tola Adeyemi, who has been the regional senior partner and chief executive of KPMG in Nigeria and West Africa, who is going to be represented by Tomi Adeoji, a partner in ESG. Our distinguished moderator, Mrs. Bimpe Afolabi, partner, internal audit, governance and risk, and panelists, Mr. Umar Yusuf Aboki, and Honorable Commissioner, Planning and Budget, Kaduna State, Theophilos Emowa, partner of Alex Legal Firm, a leading commercial and dispute resolution law firm, Dr. Muda Yusuf, founder and CEO of Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, former DG of Lagos Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Ayoteriba, CEO, ECONO0MIC Associates, fellows and members of the Institute, gentlemen of the press, and ladies and gentlemen. It's good to go through this. I know he has done the introductions, but this gives me the opportunity to say thank you to all of you for accepting to be on this call. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Governing Council of the Institute of Directors to this webinar on the Nigeria Business and Economic Outlook, which we are hosting in partnership with KPMG in Nigeria. The theme of the program is navigating the business environment in a transition year I mean, transition is a period of change from one state to another. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the year 2023 is a defining one for all of us. You will agree with me, in Nigeria. And it's also a defining moment for Nigerian business community in particular. It is a transition year where governance is going to change hands. We all expect a change in government since President Mohamed Buhari, GCFR, will be concluding his stewardship after an 8-year tenure. This will lead to a change in leadership across the various tiers of government. Of course, there will be new federal cabinet, members of the legislature at the federal level, and at other tiers, the state and local governments. So this is another challenge that Nigeria is facing. After the almighty COVID-19 pandemic, which ravaged the world for over 2 years, and the Russia-Ukraine war, which added even more challenges in vast areas like food security and so on. The country is currently facing slow growth, characterized by a huge debt profile, or what I would call debt problem, high inflation, exchange rate risk crisis, high interest rate, poor infrastructure, unstable power supply, and insecurity. And most recently, this currency redesign and distribution saga. I leave the quantitative aspect and current figures to our speakers and panel experts. For a country with a fragile economy and a myriad of challenges negatively impacting the economy and the business environment, Nigerians are eager and desirous of an election and a new government that will be visionary and provide a pathway not only for economic recovery, but also for revitalization of our nationhood. That is why IOD Nigeria is a responsible business organization with the mandate to represent our members in their capacities as directors of companies and advocate of a conducive business environment, cannot just fold its arms at this critical national discourse, which we are partnering with the highly reputable international firm KPMG. As you all know, the theme for today's discourse is navigating the business environment in a transition year. So what does it portend for business and for our country? It speaks to the anxiety, it speaks to the concerns of leaders across all the ranks and spheres of leadership. I believe this will help in enlightening leaders, managing expectations from their followership. We are quite pleased with our partnership with KPMG, and we are excited by this value proposition for our members and even for non-members of the Institute. We trust that our strategic alliance and partnerships with the public and private sector organizations will bear the same impactful fruits expected from our advocacy role. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I cannot end my address without specially extending my immense appreciation to the Research and Advocacy Committee of the Institute, led by Professor Natofo and his team for this initiative and optimizing this alliance and partnership with KPMG. I thank you very much on behalf of the Governing Council of the Institute of Directors. I look forward to a fruitful deliberation. And thank you all for your kind attention. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mrs. E.J. Chidinma. That was very insightful, especially on the areas of the imperatives for Nigerian businesses and everything that has to do with it. So we would cut to the chase and we'll quickly go straight to keynote speech, which will be ably handled by Tomi Adepoju, the partner and head enterprise risk and ESG services, KPMG in Nigeria. Toby, I'd like to welcome you to present yourself to us so that you can give us the keynote speech that we've been waiting for.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mrs. E.J. Jidema, President and Chairman of the Governing Council IOD, the Professor Natofo, Chairman, Research and Advocacy Committee IOD, members of the Governing Council of IOD, distinguished panelists who are here represented today, as well as distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone. I bring you greetings and sincere apologies from Tola Adeyemi, who is unavoidably absent today. And I have his keynote address, and I will try my best to do justice to it. So like Dr. Jidema said, we are focusing today on navigating the business environment in a transition year. And the better way to start is to really look at the objective of the keynote address, which we will look at it from 4 perspectives. One is to provide a snapshot of the Nigerian macroeconomic environment. And then we look at the highlight of the key factors that would shape the 2023 macroeconomic outlook and business environment. From there, we will distill the possible implications and impact on businesses. And we'll round up by looking at identifying initiatives and strategies that businesses and their boards can employ to be able to mitigate against this. So let's start with Nigeria at a glance. Where are we today? On the screen, you see a number of statistics. If you go to the next slide, please. You see a number of statistics shown on the screen, which just tries to give at a snapshot where we are. Some interesting ones jump out. For example, the nominal GDP as at Q3 2022 of 53.3 trillion, the population size of 216.7 million. In fact, the UN declared Nigeria as the 6th most populated country in the world. Of course, that's a bit worrisome, but when you look at the prospect as well, it could be good prospect for business if we position our rights to be able to take advantage of that population. You also see the average oil production as at 2022 at 1.38. And of course, the number of people living below poverty level, 95.1 million out of the 216 million. That is quite a lot. Inflation rates as at November 2022 was 21.47%. So the indices are a bit worrisome. And when we then try to do a deep dive into this to see the cyclical patterns of growth that we've had, we can see that we've had a lot of external shocks and structural issues as well. Over the last 7 years, Nigeria's economic growth has gone through a series of ups and downs, a period of growth in 2014 to 2015, and then a slowdown in 2016. Recovery commenced in 2017, and then COVID-19 slipped us back into recession during the 19 and 20 period. And the key highlights of the performance of the economy over those periods include the oil sector, which continues to underperform due to insecurity, low investment in the sector, oil theft, as well as high cost of production. You also have the agriculture sector that continues to show resilience despite structural and fundamental issues plaguing the sector. The financial sector continued to grow due to the sustained pickup in the economic activities and aggressive loan disbursements to meet the CBN's LDR mandate. The other growing sectors include the ICT and financial services, although these growing sectors are not also having the desired impacts that we would have expected. And then growth in trade has been partly attributed to the reopening of our borders. So if you look at the economy, we recovered between 2021 and 2022. The IMF projects that Nigerian economic growth will come in at about 3% in 2023. So that begs the question, what are the factors that will shape the 2023 macroeconomic outlook? And there are 2 main factors as far as we know, the global dynamics as well as the domestic dynamics. A combination of these two, we believe, would shape how our macroeconomic outlook in 2023 would play out. If we start with the global front, the Russian-Ukraine war, just like Dr. Jidema said, continues to disrupt the supply chain of major commodities, especially grains and palladium, while the sanctions on Russia puts a strain on the energy supply across Europe, and this drives up the global energy price. It also continues to determine the flow of global funding. The increased global energy prices, even in the midst of the shortages, has triggered a global inflationary pressure. And of course, we see monetary tightening in a number of places, especially because the US dollar is stronger, and that has created crisis in a number of countries. And we are feeling even the impact in Nigeria. If you then try to do a deep dive into these growth patterns around the world, as you can see on the next slide, we can see what we've tried to do is to show the growth rate for selected countries and regions. And we can see that for the overall global economy, it contracted by -3.3% in 2020, dragged by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the US economy faced a recession in Q1 and Q2, while it recovered in Q3 of 2022. The Chinese economy was hobbled by their troubled real estate sector, as well as their zero COVID policy. They've since changed this policy now, and which has also then caused some sort of resurgence in COVID-19. We pray that it stays where it is, and we don't come back to have, a full blowout of COVID-19 around these areas. Europe was a mixed bag of economic performance due to the Eastern Europe that was deeply impacted by the Ukraine war. The IMF expects that a third of the world economy will be in recession in 2023. And for countries that maybe may not be in recession, it would feel like they are actually in recession. For a number of hundreds of millions of people, even within those countries. And we're already seeing the signs. A number of companies in the US, in Western world, are beginning to lay off workers. That will definitely have ripple effects across the globe. And then if we then look at these global dynamics again, what are the implications for Nigeria? On the next slide, we can see about six major implications that we've projected for Nigeria. The first being higher debt service costs. We have borrowed to our teeth. The cost of borrowing in the international capital market is expected to increase given the monetary tightening in advanced countries. We also expect to see a decline in diaspora remittances because of the higher interest rates that is now occurring in some of those economies. As at 2019, the diaspora flows from UK was about 24 billion, which was quite high. This dipped in 2021 to about 19.2. We don't have the statistics yet for 2022. And then if I also look at the other things, the imported inflation, which we will still talk on later on, the declining financial support and funding assistance, because everybody is struggling. Everybody is trying to manage their own economy, and this definitely would have effect on us. If we then focus on the domestic dynamics to see what the effect of this would be, we can see on the next slide that the federal government continues to pursue an expansionary fiscal policy to drive growth, as seen in our budget. We've put the highlights of the budget on the screen. And if I just talk through some of the highlights, the projected revenue is about 10.5 trillion naira, which is a 5% increase from prior year. The expenditure, on the other hand, is about 21.8 trillion, which is a 20% increase from prior year as well. Debt servicing accounts for most of that increase, with about 70% increase from prior year. The budget was built with some conservative assumptions, inflation rate of 17.16%, we already bust that, oil price of about $75 per barrel, oil production of about 1.69 million barrels per day, and then the chief of them, subsidy. It was projected that we would remove subsidy by mid-year. The budget deficit of about 11.3 trillion was a 40% increase over prior year. That is quite high. If we drill down on the budget deficit and look at how it will be financed on the next slide, we can see that the plan is to fund that deficit through a number of channels. The key amongst them being domestic loans from Nigerian banks and the CBN. And of course, that also has implications for the businesses. What are the key takeaways from this fiscal landscape from our domestic perspective? We've projected about 4 of them. For us, key takeaways would include the federal government may try to push harder for tax revenues to be able to close the deficits. And of course, this will put further pressures on taxpayers, which are businesses and the individuals. The federal government may likely increase some tax rates, particularly the VAT. With no clear action plan to ease the suffering arising from the potential subsidy removal, the new government is likely to extend the subsidy regime and seek additional budgetary funding to be able to do this. This will definitely increase the debt profile and in turn, another tax drive. The increased budget, especially the domestic borrowing, will put a strain on private sector lending, making it difficult and expensive for private sector to access loans due to the crowding out by the government. Another driver for the domestic dynamics is the Finance Act, which we will still have a detailed discussion on later on today. Over the last few years, the federal government has released annually the Finance Act to enable the realization of the annual budgets. Just like prior Finance Acts, the Finance Bill 2022 focuses on 5 key thematic areas, which is sought, please go back to the previous slide, which is sought to amend the legal provisions on key monetary policies, particularly tax. The 5 key areas are on the screen. But as of today, the finance bill for 2023 is yet to be passed. There's still a lot of consultations that are ongoing. The implications of the finance bill for businesses are, for us, there are 4 major implications. One is the general one, which is that the increase in the tertiary education trust fund, phasing out certain incentives such as excise on services, deductibility of capital losses under the capital gains tax. The businesses will need to start to rethink their commercial arrangements, especially their tax strategy and their expenditure projections to be able to manage these implications. There are VAT implications as well. The Finance Bill 2022 proposes additional VAT compliance for businesses that have been appointed as by the FIRS as agents of tax collection. Businesses would need to note this carefully as there are penalties for non-compliance. Oil and gas implications as well. The PPT provisions has been aligned to the PIA fiscal provisions, which will impact upstream companies that are yet to transition. Increased tax rate for gas flaring companies is also there, and a potential investment allowance that would likely impact investment decisions in associated and non-associated gas. Lastly, the financial services implications. The deductibility of deferred annuity premiums in respect of life insurance is projected to increase the attractiveness of such products and probably stimulate activities in our insurance sector. If you drill down on inflation, which is on the next slide, and just look at how the rise in inflation has been persistent over the last 2 quarters. Local inflation is another factor that we believe will determine our macro outlook for 2023. This has risen persistently. In 2022, inflation rose from about 16% in January to about 21.5% in December. With the planned subsidy removal, there is potential that this may yet rise or at best remain within 21%. And we've also tried to show on the next slide the gap between what's happening in our parallel markets. The inflationary pressure was also further worsened by the gap between the official Naira rate as well as what's happening in the parallel market. Some of the factors include the declining forex reserves, So we don't have what we use to defend the Naira anymore. And I mean, which was caused by our rising debts and a dip in revenue due to the dip in oil production in 2022. The increased demand for USD as well. Election is coming. We've all seen all sorts of news in the newspapers. We don't know how true it is. There's demand for also dollars by private businesses as well as individuals who are going to school. I mean, putting a lot of pressure on the forex. So if you look at all of this, what has CBN done to try to manage or curb the inflation? They've tried to put in some things in place. I mean, by attempting to curb inflation, by strengthening our monetary policy through the cashless economic drive, and of course, the new Naira redesign. The objectives, as at the time it was brought out, was to curb inflation and reduce counterfeiting, strengthen monetary policy, and minimize terrorism. Last year, the CBN launched the redesign of the 200, 500, and 1,000 Naira notes. And this has been implemented already, but of course, we are already seeing a number of issues as a result of this implementation. The drive for cashless economy is there already. I mean, some people seem to, we've seen sometimes pictures of small SMEs or people hawking, now putting up placards to show their bank accounts to be able to get funds for what they do. I mean, how long that would last and how much that would extend even the banking, activities is up for us to see. But of course, this has driven cashless economy and accelerated investment in digital platforms. It has also increased the banking penetration and enhanced service delivery. The growth of financial services is also there, but of course, all of this may also cause an increased cybersecurity within the country. Another thing that is being looked at to affect our 2023 projection is the planned delivery of the Dangote refinery. The takeoff of the Dangote refinery is expected to impact the business environment in 2023. Importation of petrol accounts for a significant portion of our import bill, about 21%. Also, in addition, the availability of petrol, the takeoff of the refinery would reduce the demand for foreign currency that we are using to actually import this product, and maybe further stabilize the exchange rate and reduce the stemming inflation that we've been seeing. Finally, another domestic issue that may impact 2023 is the outcome of the election, which is staring us in the face. By Saturday, we will all be going to the polls to go and elect our new leader. We believe that irrespective of the outcome, any real progress that will be seen in the context of the economy will be a function of 4 major factors. One is the pro-market leadership of whoever emerges, the market orientation and ability to enact economic and public sector reforms and policies to expand the role of the private sector would be very key. The political will of the candidates to hit the ground running and take tough decisions around topics like criminality of our oil theft, removal of subsidy within the first 90 days will be very, very critical. The quality, please go back to the previous slide. The quality of the executive is also, is very important. The ability of the leader, of the person that emerges, to be able to choose credible, quality cabinet members as soon as the person resumes is extremely important. So we are not waiting for another 3-4 months before this happens. And of course, the ability to manage a complex environment is going to be key, and manage our various stakeholders. Another factor would be even that would confront the administration. Also, other things we've spoken about earlier. You can go to the next slide. The security challenge, everybody knows about that. The funding issues, productivity challenge we are facing, FX challenge we've spoken about, and subsidy challenge. So in all of this, what are the implications for the business environment, and what kind of strategies do we need to put in place to navigate all of this? There are about 8 implications that we thought of in terms of how this would impact the Nigerian business environment. And I'll just pick some of the 8 that we have on the screen. Technology infrastructure pressures. There's accelerated transition to non-cash payment platforms, and increasing digital access is definitely going to test our resilience due to increased usage costs. It may cause increased cyber attacks and fraud. How prepared we are, whether from the financial services industries, businesses themselves, and even private individuals, how prepared we are for this, I mean, we definitely need to see. Customers, increasing pressures on customer purchasing power. As we've seen, a lot of people are complaining they don't have access to cash. They are not able to survive on a daily basis because they can't just find the money to spend. This is increasingly going to impact even the business environment. And of course, talent. This has been a major issue for us over the last couple of years. A lot of businesses have lost key staff. The high attrition due to the JAPA conundrum continues to be a major issue, and people are leaving the country, not necessarily leaving the organization. So if we are able to improve our business operating environment, clearly a number of people will be willing to come back, and we will be able to attract back our key talents that we've lost. What do businesses, especially directors who are hereby represented today, what do we need to do to be able to manage all of these issues? There are 9 things we've projected, and I'll just quickly speak through the 9 things. The first for us is the need to articulate a robust business resilience plan. There's a need to define scenario-based business plans based on the potential outcomes of the macroeconomic outlook for the year. Post-election survival will be crucial, and a lot of businesses would likely have to have a strategy refresh post-election to ensure that their continued relevance and survival. Boards will be saddled with a new type of resilience to be able to provide oversight on the business. The second one is the ability to ensure cost optimization. Many management teams and boards have never experienced the combination of a major recession, inflation, or interest rates at the forecast levels all happening at the same time. There's a need to periodically review the cost profile of the business with a view to optimizing and ensuring business sustainability. The third thing will be the need to adopt proactive risk management. This cannot even be negotiated. We need to be able to proactively manage our risk, optimize our risk and our bottom line. If we do this proactively, then we would be able to avoid a crisis situation within the businesses. The fourth is improving customer experience and satisfaction. There's a need to review our customer value proposition so that we can increase the satisfaction we are giving our customers and also improve the customer experience. Go through a customer journey. How will the customer feel if I'm the customer? How do I feel being able, wanting to buy a service or a product from the organization? Is it a good experience? Will I come back? There's a need to look at that. The fifth is we've tagged building supply chain resilience. There's a need to explore local and regional options to be able to optimize our supply chain. Directors would need to provide oversight and support management's initiative to rethink, rework, or restore critical supply chains. Some of the initiatives may include updating the supply chain risk and vulnerability assessments, diversifying our supply chain, re-examining the supply chain structure and footprint, developing local and regional supply chains in spite of our security challenge, and deploying technology to be able to improve the supply chain visibility and risk management. The sixth point is strengthening our technological infrastructure and cybersecurity. The acceleration of artificial intelligence and digital strategies continue to increase the sophistication of hacking and ransomware attacks on our businesses. It can be among the users, the companies, the vendors, even government agencies. The risk is elevated. We need to minimize the vulnerability of our technology systems to cyber attacks, to fraud, to manipulation. We are losing a lot of staff. How are we sure what those staff are doing before even relocating? Well, how do we know the kind of things that have been posted? I mean, in our systems, there's a need to actually look at what we have, our strategies and our tools that we've put in place to ensure that they are indeed resilient. We need to define policies to manage socio-political and ESG issues. A number of policies have come out and are still going to come out. The IFRS has indicated that it will release an ESG IFRS which FRC has indicated that they were going to adopt wholly. How will that impact the ESG plans of our companies? The Nigerian Climate Change Act has been issued. That also has implications. So the social and political issues are becoming forefront and center in the boardroom. There's a lot of scrutiny on companies, whether they are taking a stance on things or they are keeping quiet. And so there's a need for us to embed ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues, including climate risk and diversity, equity, and inclusion issues in our risk and in our strategy, so that we are sensitive to this. We are making plans to report on this, and we are avoiding greenwashing as much as possible. The 8th point is on innovation. Clearly, businesses need to promote innovation across their operating models to be able to improve profitability, to harness opportunity while optimizing efficiency and effectiveness. And lastly, there's a need to deliver a strong employee value proposition and succession planning. I know almost every organization represented here today has lost 1 or 2 key personnel. We need to keep strategizing and adjusting our talent attraction and development strategies to be able to meet the challenge of finding, developing and retaining our talents in a labor-constrained market. There's also a need for us to develop and maintain a succession pipeline for key roles, either at the board level, at management level, or key roles within the organization. Our talent strategy is an imperative, and we cannot afford not to do anything. So for us, these are the key things that we need to do to be able to navigate through 2023 and beyond. And I believe the panel members will do justice to drill down on a lot of these things in their session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tomi. In fact, at the moment, I'm not sure if I know Tola made the right choice to say, Tomi, you need to represent me and in my absence. So, but a few things here. As a firm, as an insightful firm, KPMG, we like to pick out, different insights from what we do. And one of the things that struck me in Tomi's presentation is that she mentioned that we expect 1/3 of the world's economy to be in recession. I think that was a quote. And for those who are not in the recession, they will feel the recession. And that alludes to the fact of, why people should not run away from Nigeria, why people should not jackpot, if I may rephrase that, or not even jackpot as an individual, but companies also jackpot. Years ago, we had some FMCG companies left for Ghana and some other areas, maybe because of problems of power and the rest of them. Well, if we're able to focus on our business operating environment and optimize them, then we wouldn't be having jackpot both on an individual basis and on an organizational basis. I think that's just one of the insights I would like to bring to the fore here today. But very quickly, let's move on to what we see here in front of us, the 2023 KPMG CFO Forum Survey. But a very quick background here. So KPMG Nigeria organizes what we call a CFO Forum on an annual basis. And what this does is that it gathers around the heads of finance and the chief financial officers across sectors in Nigeria to discuss the financial landscape and, of course, our economic landscape to see how we can forge ahead and bring solutions to the challenges presented in the economy. And by so doing, what we do to make sure that happens in form of a report is to send out a survey or an interview sheet where we have chief financial officers and we have heads of finance of various organizations give us their opinions as to their pain points, opinions as to areas that can be improved in the economy to ensure that these various companies thrive in the economy, opinions as to what they can do, their recommendations, and other suggestions that we can do as collaborative firms, even as KPMG, to support them in terms of consultancy. And these are the things that we talk about and deliberate. And so what we do, or what we have done now, is to put in to design a survey form in form of a QR code, so that the people who are heads of finance here in this meeting and those who are also chief financial officers can please bring out your phones and scan the QR code. You will have a form appear before you where you'll have a couple of questions just in 5 minutes, very quickly. You can fill out those questions as the chief financial officer or as the head of finance of your company. And even if you're not, you can please send the link. We have a link in the chat box where you can pick out the respective links that goes to the same survey. You can share it with your chief financial officers. You can share it with your heads of finance and the likes in your company. That way we're able to get your opinions. We're able to get findings from what your financial officers, from the pain points that you're going through, and form a holistic opinion that we can turn out as a report, share to you and the rest of the stakeholders across the Nigeria sphere. So please take a little time, bring out your phone, scan this, and if you wish to apply, or if you wish to register or use this form, or send to any other person that you know that needs this, you can take the link via the chat box. So I would just give about, I know 3 minutes has passed, I'll just give about 2 minutes before we move ahead. Thank you. If you have questions pertaining the survey form, you can always put the questions in the chat box, and you can reach us also at KPMG. We will find ways to communicate to you. If you need the link, if you're unable to get the link via the chat box or the screen, we can find ways of communicating it to you. So we have just 1 more minute before we move on with the program. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to thank everyone for participating in the 2023 KPMG CFO Forum survey. Like I mentioned, if you need more information concerning this survey, you can reach out to us in KPMG, or you can even reach out to any of the IOD members that you have their contacts, and we can pass on the information to you. Very quickly, we'll move on to the summary of what we just heard. I mean, we went through the keynote session, and of course, some people have questions, some people, we have answers as well. We have an able team here that will be able to dissect and give us answers. But I'll just quickly introduce one of our partners at KPMG, Bimpe Afolabi, who will carry on with the Q&A session, especially for the keynote speech that we have all heard. So Bimpe Afolabi is a partner in the internal audit, governance, risk, compliance, and enterprise for KPMG in Nigeria. She has over 20 years of experience and has been working in the risk management units of the firm, a unit which handles the firm's risk management and ethics and independence matters in connection with the business of the firm. She holds a petroleum engineering degree from the University of Ibadan and a global executive MBA from IE Business School, Spain, a fellow of ICANN, an associate of the Chartered Institutes of Taxation of Nigeria, and a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. So I'd like to welcome Bimpe Afolabi to run the Q&A session for us. Bimpe.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome everyone to this session with the IOD. It's a pleasure for KPMG to collaborate with IOD on this event. I stand on all existing protocols, and at this point, because of time constraints, we will move directly into the panel session after I do a summary of the keynote speech that Tomi had ably given us. You will realize that Tomi has done a very good job at letting us know the state of the economy in Nigeria. And if we look through that snapshot of where we are in Nigeria today, 216.7 million Nigerians are available for anybody that wants to actually conduct business. That shows, that portends, the opportunity that is within this country. When we look at the inflation rates on the other side, though, that actually also portends some sort of worrisome, big concerns for businesses. And these are all the things that we are going to speak to. In summary, as to what Tomi also took us through, there are critical 9 things that businesses should consider going through this transition year. We need to, as organizations, articulate our business resilience plan. We need to ensure that we actually focus on cost, and we need to optimize our costs. It's very important as we go into this, the next couple of months, that these are our focus areas. We need to adopt a proactive risk management. We can't continue to do business as is. We need to consider all the threats and opportunities that are available for our organizations and adopt the appropriate risk management strategies. Customer is definitely key, and we need to seek for ways with which we can improve our customer experience and satisfaction. Without them, we would not be able to survive. Our supply chain resilience is very critical. I need to actually emphasize that if we do not work on these parts as organization, then we would actually lose on opportunities that could come. And at this point, as Tomi has said, we need to look at local and regional options, consider all the available alternatives to what we have currently, so that we can ensure that our supply chain is not disrupted. Moving on, strengthen our technological infrastructure. We know what's happening currently with the Naira redesign. We know that there's been a whole lot of push for the cashless policy. And what does that mean for us? We need to have infrastructure to deal with this sort of changes. And there will be quite a lot of changes coming on. So organizations should focus on technological infrastructure, considering as well the cybersecurity, the risks that come with technology. Cybersecurity becomes top-notch or top priority for us to take a look at. We need to start defining policies to manage our social, political, and ESG issues. Regulations are coming up with more policies and procedures that would guide the way we look at ESG matters going forward. We need to be prepared. We need to be ready. It's time that we start taking a focus as organization on these matters, and we need to innovate. Like I said earlier, innovation is also one thing that would enable the SWIFT to remain actually ahead of the curve. And so as organization, we need to start thinking of how better can we, do things as in our businesses. And finally, just like Tomi said, we need to consider our employees. There's the local balance of JAPA. It's still happening. It hasn't really stopped. But if we consider our employees and actually put in a strong employee value proposition and actually show them that, yes, Nigeria is not any different from what is happening across the world. Tomi has told us that recession will be felt all across the world. Maybe we can change the narrative for our youths in particular that feel that maybe there is an El Dorado over there and that they need to leave Nigeria. So it is very important for organizations to relook the way we treat our employees, have a strong employee value proposition, and ensure that there is successful succession planning put in place. So thank you very much. That's the summary I want to bring to fore. At this point, I would like to introduce our panelists. Our panelists will be doing a deep dive into all the keynotes that Tomi, the keynote speech has spoken to. But because we have a panel of gentlemen and a lady, ladies first, I'll start with introducing the ladies. I hope the gentlemen would permit me to do this. Okay, so I'll start with Madam Uma Yusuf Aboki. She is currently the Commissioner, Planning and Budget Commission in Kaduna State, having previously served as the Executive Secretary of the Kaduna Investment Promotion Agency, the KDDIPA, with over 20 years of banking experience spanning various sectors in the banking industry, including the Guarantee Trust Bank PLC and Sterling Bank PLC. He rose to the position of Deputy General Manager and Head of Institutional Banking in the Northwest region at the peak of her career. She holds a master's degree in finance and controlling from the Swiss Management Center, Switzerland, a postgraduate diploma in management science from Kaduna Polytechnic, and a BSc in statistics from the University of Maiduguri. Huma is a member of some professional bodies, including the Institute of Chartered Bankers and the Institute of Chartered Economics in Nigeria. So welcome, Mrs. Huma Yusuf Aboki. Thank you. Okay, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, thank you. Moving on, I would go on to Dr. Hayo Teriba. Doctor is the CEO of Economics Associates, where he leads consulting on Nigeria's economic outlook with a focus on local and global corporate issues. He is the Vice Chairman of the Technical Committee of the National Council on Privatization, where he aligns privatization programs with economic exigencies, and is a member of the Governing Council of the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. Some of his professional experiences include chief economics at the These Days newspaper, faculty member at the Lagos Business School, head of research at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, and company economics at the UAC of Nigeria. Ayo consults for blue chip companies, federal and state ministries, and other international bodies like the USAID and the World Bank. Ayo earned a BSc Economics from the University of Ibadan, MSc Economics from Ibadan in 1990, MPhil Economics of Developing Countries at the Cambridge, and he is a DFID scholar at the University of Cambridge in 1992, and a PhD in Applied Econometrics and Monetary Economics from the University of Durham in 2003. He's an alumnus of the Lagos Business School and NC Business School Executive Programs. Welcome, Dr. Ayo Teriba.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Moving on, I'll speak to Dr. Muda Yusuf. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you. Dr. Muda Yusuf is the founder of the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise and the immediate past Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is a leading advocate of an enabling environment for the Nigerian private sector and has vast knowledge and exposure to business research and economic policy issues affecting business. He's an economist who has contributed immensely to the national economic discourse and participated in various high-level public policy advocacy dialogues at both the federal and state levels to foster private sector participation in Nigerian economic development. Dr. Yusuf obtained a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Ilorin, a master's degree in economics from the University of Lagos, and a master's degree in business research and a doctorate in business administration from Swiss Business School, Switzerland. Welcome, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Theophilus Ebuma is one of the founding members at ALEX, that is AELEX. He is the head of the corporate and commercial practice of the firm with a focus on tax. His experience as a legal practitioner spans over almost 4 decades. He draws on his training as both an engineer and a lawyer to provide insightful advice to the firm's clients. He is admitted to law practice in Nigeria, England, and Wales, and Ghana. He regularly advises on Nigeria's corporate structures, mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, shareholders' rights, and other corporate governance issues. He also advises on transaction structures and strategies. He's widely acknowledged as one of Nigeria's leading tax lawyers. He is ranked by Who Legal as a national leader in corporate tax and by International Tax Review as a highly regarded individual. He's also ranked by Legal 500 as a leading individual and by IFLR 1000 as highly regarded, and individually ranked in Chambers Global, where he's highlighted for his deep-seated experience in corporate and commercial law in Nigeria. Sources say he is a very deep thinker, a very trusted hand. So he was the pioneer chair of the tax committee of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law, and is currently a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, and is a vice chair of the Nigerian branch of the International Fiscal Association. Welcome, Mr. Theophilus Emuma.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can see that we have well over 300 participants on this webinar, and I would ask that when you have questions for our panelists, please make use of the question and answer section of the tool so that we can pick up your questions and ensure to indicate who you want the questions directed at. So at this point, we will get into the panel sessions. So let me start with Dr. Ayoteriba. So doctor, we've heard from the keynote speaker. Tommy actually did say a number of things that would shape the microeconomic landscape in 2023 and their impact on businesses. What are your views on the 2023 macro indices and how should businesses respond? We would love to hear from you as an economist. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. And I commend both KPMG and the Institute of Directors for organizing this event. And I'm glad to have the opportunity to contribute. The macroeconomic outlook, the overview that has been, the keynote stage that has been set by Tommy is comprehensive, is exhaustive. And on my part, I'll be trying to impress on us that macroeconomic outlook, requires a hierarchical ordering of the factors. Not all the variables, not all the factors are equally important. Some factors are more important than the other. So the outlook of the Nigerian economy, I won't want to repeat the facts that Tommy has very, very competently put on the table. But I'm dwelling now on Nigeria's macroeconomic outlook. And Nigeria's outlook depends not on 5 variables, not on 4 variables, not on 10 variables. It depends very crucially on one variable. Very much like the people in the agri sector will be wisely advised that of all the factors that you may list that is going to affect the crop, that one variable is key. If the rain fails, the crop fails. So as far as the Nigerian, whatever else you do, as far as the Nigerian macroeconomic outlook is concerned at this stage, the problem is illiquidity. That Nigeria is not liquid. Whether you are looking at fiscal liquidity, or you are looking at foreign exchange liquidity, or you are looking at systemic liquidity. In other words, liquidity available to government, liquidity available in foreign exchange market, or liquidity available in the financial system, that's banks, bonds, and equity. Nigeria is not liquid. And unless Nigeria deals with that liquidity problem, the outlook for the country has been bleak and will remain bleak. And you could see that from the kind of figures that Tommy gave us about government budget. That's the least certain component of the budget is revenue. Although I hear Tommy say, do more to raise tax. Yeah, the fact, the economy, we have an economy that is about 200 trillion naira, 210 trillion. annually. And Tommy said in the fourth quarter, it was 53.4 trillion. Now, you have a 53.4 trillion expectation of output. This quarter, we spent January looking for fuel and currency. We spent February looking for fuel and currency. The chances of we meeting up to the 54 trillion that we recorded in fourth quarter is very, very bleak. If we put the uncertainty of fuel and currency behind us, maybe because there is going to be an election, let's hope that the election happens peacefully and is decisive, and we, let currency become available. We are trying to salvage the third month in the quarter. So the trouble is, unless the government, if GDP is not certain to measure up to what it measured up to last quarter, where will the tax come from? That's then the foreign exchange. Reserves are declining, exchange rate is weakening. So the key first problem is Nigeria needs to find liquidity for government funding and for Forex and for the system. Second is that the other problems, you can group them into the consequences of illiquidity. The reason you have devaluation is that there is not enough for foreign reserves. The reason there is not going to be growth is that you can't fund economic transactions. The reason you have inflation is that you have, so let's put appropriate emphasis on what to expect from the outlook and what to encourage the government to do. So, and well, on that part, I do think that much of the good news didn't come with the budget. Much of the good news coming out of the government came like a month after the budget had been announced. And it's about, the president informing us, that the country now has identified about 18 trillion stock of national assets under the management of the newly reconstituted MOFI, and the government has charged them to grow those assets to about 100 trillion. So for the first time, and it was a month after the budget was announced, the budget came with the depressing news that debt was 44 trillion, it was going to go to 77 trillion, and debt cost was already 6 trillion at 44 trillion. So if you work out what it implies, if it goes to 77 trillion, you're talking of 10.5 trillion. But a month later, February 1, we have now learned that we not only owe, we actually own something, and the government is beginning to manage that which we own. So you expect that they may be able to attract liquidity into those assets, and very soon we'll not just be talking about debt and debt cost, we'll be talking about assets and the return on the assets, which is very significant positive narrative. That brightens the outlook for me. It means that you could hope that what government is not getting from GDP, maybe government will now begin to get from its assets. And you could hope that while you can consider interest payments and leakage, the return on such assets will become also inflows. So I'm saying that the counter narratives provided by the conversation around the assets that Nigeria own brightens the outlook. Now, if I flip from that to what should businesses do, those are the two posters you gave me, is that yes, what businesses do similarly, if you have to look at the macro from an hierarchical listing of factors, you also have to look at how businesses respond to that situation from two angles. What are businesses vulnerable to? And how can they build resilience in the face of such vulnerabilities? And the warning I give is that it's not about cutting costs. Sometimes what it takes for you to build resilience is that you have to incur cost. For example, we all say, do digitalize. You are not going to digitalize without adding on costs, in particular costs that you were not bearing before. Or in this, but in this age, economic activities are migrating from place to space. So it's inevitable that you are just trying to do trade-off between costs and benefits. If there is a benefit to be gained by making your business more resilient, so you are saying that pursuing that resilience gives you more benefit than it gives you costs. And then more generically, when you are talking of output, yeah, well, we are all looking at, tightening margins, commodity prices will rise, there could be global recession and the rest of it. It's not always that cheap is better. Quite often, what you need to differentiate your business is not cheap, it's expensive. If you look at market differentiation, okay, if you want to produce generic items on differentiated products, which are like commodities, you can't set the price. You can go for cheap. But if you want to differentiate your products, you don't want to move, you want to stand out from the generic where you can charge a premium on it, then it can be cheap. You have to fortify. If you can compare, iPhone devices with some of the other generic phones in the market. So I just want to say, the opportunities may not be as simple as cutting costs. It might have to be you thinking more seriously about your value chains, you looking at what segments of your value chains where the gains are the least, and look at what segment of your value chain where the gains are fattest, and incur the necessary cost that pushes you, into segments where the gains are fattest as you try to differentiate yourself and gain resilience in the market. I'd like to leave it there.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Ayoteriba. And of course, the lessons here is cost optimization as against cost costing. And of course, there are good narratives that we should hold on to. Maybe we should be more optimistic than pessimistic at this stage. And I think that's really the message that some of our businesses would love to hear. Thank you so much for that, for those insights. Dr. Muda Yusuf, let me go over to you. We've heard that subsidy is planned to be removed in June. And this is expected to lead to further cost pressures as a result of the increase in the price of the PMS. Please tell us, what would you advise organizations, the directors, manning these organizations, how they can get ready for the fact of the subsidy removal?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President, distinguished panelists. First, I'd like to say that the issue of the subsidy removal is easier said than done, because I've heard from all the leading political presidential candidates saying that the subsidy will go. The government has said so. Some of us that are economists have also said that that is the way to go. Of course, that is the way to go from a purely economic perspective. But some of these issues go beyond pure economics. So we are not sure what the response will be on the social front if the government takes over May 29, and the next day you are announcing a wholesale removal of subsidy. I don't know how feasible that will be. So I think we need to worry about how that process will be managed. If we see a sudden shock as a result of the subsidy removal, there could be some backlash, and the outcome of which we may not be able to predict. But it is the way to go from a purely economic perspective. But generally, as to what businesses can do, I think it's about managing costs, it's about energy efficiency, and the rest of them. But more importantly, are the opportunities that the subsidy removal will bring for the economy. Because if there is any sector that has suffered from a kind of policy repression, I think it's the oil and gas sector, particularly the downstream sector. We have not been able to generate the kind of revenue we should get from that sector. We have not been able to generate the kind of investment that we should get from that sector as a result of the overregulation of the sector. So the removal of the subsidy will be a major policy reform, even beyond the issue of the cost to us, but more importantly about the investment. There's also a revenue effect, of course. We're able to, effectively remove the subsidy. We are looking at between savings of between 6 to 7 trillion naira added to the federation accounts. That, for me, I think it will be a good thing for the liquidity that Dr. Tereba talked about. Then there is also the investment effect, which I talked about. Many investors have not been able to invest in our refineries. I'm talking of private investors now. And it's amazing that over 60 years of our being in the oil and gas sector, we don't have vibrant private investors in the downstream sector, which is very unfortunate. The refineries are dominated by the public sector. You don't have very sound petrochemical industries. The pipelines are in the hands of governments, and all the other key investments in the sector are public sector driven. That is why we suffer a lot from all the challenges of high energy prices that take advantages of it. We have become victims of high oil prices, which of course is very unfortunate. Then there is also the foreign exchange effect. Close to 1/3 of our foreign exchange expenditure is going to the importation of petroleum products. That has far-reaching implications for our foreign reserves. It has implications for our foreign exchange rates, and even the liquidity that Dr. Tereba talked about, the liquidity in the foreign exchange market. So a major reform in the oil and gas space around this issue of subsidy removal and the improvements in the governance of the oil and gas sector, particularly within the framework of the Petroleum Industry Act, will help to improve foreign exchange earnings. First, from the point of view of import substitution, all the things that we're importing, the over $15 billion of importation of petroleum products, if we're able to produce that locally, we'll have made a significant progress as far as import substitution is concerned. There's also the foreign exchange earnings opportunity. As a leading oil producing country, there are opportunities for us to export petroleum products to the West African sub-region. Ideally, we should be dominating the market, in the sub-region as far as petroleum products is concerned, if the policy environment was right. So if we're able to attract a lot more investment in the oil and gas sector as a result of this reform, we're likely to be able to generate a lot of foreign exchange from the exportation of petroleum products, PMS, diesel, AGO, even petrochemical products, even fertilizer. These are the kind of things that this policy will bring up. So when we talk about subsidy, we should broaden the scope beyond just looking at the issue of removing the subsidy to save the pressure it is exerting on government revenue, to look more at the investment opportunities and the opportunities it gives us to diversify the economy, the opportunities it gives to strengthen our foreign reserves, and also deepen investment and create quality jobs. If we do it properly, we will attract more investment into that sector than we have in telecoms. So that, for me, are the major issues, but we need to worry about the transition process from where we are to a full deregulation regime, so that we don't have a new administration that will have what you can call a hard landing to this subsidy problem and create another chaos from inception. And of course, already many businesses have adjusted to a deregulated energy space by what they expend on diesel. This is already fully deregulated. Aviation fuel is already deregulated. Gas is already deregulated. Kerosene is already deregulated. And the exposure of businesses to energy costs are coming largely from this space. The exposure of major businesses to PMS is not that much, but for the SMEs and for the average Nigerian, the exposure is quite huge. So those are my perspectives around this issue of subsidy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. Good insights. it seems that we all agree that subsidy will bring about the good outcomes that we actually are hoping for. However, I think the devil is in the detail in the implementation of the policy, and it has to be somewhat done gradually in a form that the impact or the sudden impact is not negatively felt by people. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Yusuf. I'll move over to Ms. Aboki, please. When we look at the country today, ma'am, we see rising debt. I mean, it's been presented in the keynotes. We still see some weak economic growth, high inflation, mounting insecurities. These are the major issues that Nigerians are actually encountering. So what is your view? In your view, did this 2023 budget respond to these challenges? And what role do you expect that the private sector to play in supporting government in increasing revenues? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to take it from a Kaduna State perspective, which is really my own key concern, and to look at the budget of Kaduna State for 2023 and what were our key considerations in drawing up that budget. Of course, Temi has done a great deal of explanation and given great details into the economic indices, from inflation to the GDP. Kaduna State is also one of those states where we have a high debt stock. Even though we have tried to reduce the debt stock, our debt stock in 2021 was 86.3. We reduced that by 83.2 billion in 2022, and we hope to keep reducing that. So it is on the basis of those things that we developed the Kaduna State and prepared the Kaduna State 2023 budget. We'll call the budget of sustainable growth and development, and it was also developed on the backdrop of the state development plan. The Kaduna State has a state development plan 2021 to 2025, which forms the basis for which we draw up our budgets. We hope that this year's budget would increase the state's GDP by about 7%, reduce our inflation by about 16%. And with the state's arrears clearance framework and debt management strategy in place, we expect that the state's debt will increase a bit because of forex inflation and not necessarily because of increase in the debt stock, because a major portion of Kaduna State's debt stock is in foreign currency. So any change in the in rates affects that engaged in those businesses. Someone is speaking.
Yes, sir. Please, can we all mute our microphones so that Ms. Aboki can actually just be the only one speaking? Thank you.
And we took into consideration that this year's budget is a budget in a transition year. So our consideration for this year's budget is to ensure that we complete all ongoing projects and hand over a government where there are less ongoing projects than abandoned projects. We have continued to ensure that our capital budget is way above our recurrent budget since we came into this administration in 2015. We've tried to maintain a 65% to 30 to 35% capital to recurrent budget. So for me, critically, some of the key challenges for the budget.
Mm-hmm. Well, quite unfortunate. It appears as though we've lost Madam Aboki. That could be as a result of network challenges. Whilst she's still trying to get back to, I think we can move on. She was actually giving us an highlight of how Kaduna State government has actually structured their state budget and what they were, she was about getting into what they were seeking to achieve in terms of collaboration with the
private.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
Yes, I'm back. Apologies. So my network has been unstable. Let me just put up my video. So we've tried to address key challenges in this year's budget, which is to address infrastructural deficits. We have concentrated a lot in ensuring that we complete ongoing projects, like I said earlier on. We have created, as a state, 3 metropolitan authorities, who would manage the investments we have put in our critical cities in the state. We have, as a policy, created agencies that would support us, work with us to attract investments in the state. And for the state, our investment portfolio over the years has grown from when we took over at about $500 million today at about $4.2 billion and continues to grow. We have some of the largest investments in Kaduna State. We have the single largest investment in sub-Saharan Africa, which is the African Natural Resources Steel Manufacturing Plant here in Kaduna. And upon completion, we hope that this would employ a large proportion of Kaduna State citizens and provide that economic environment that we so desire. And our hope is that this investment that will attract will help us open newer cities in the state, and which will reduce a lot of the challenges that we see across the state, which includes insecurity, poverty indexes, and all whatnot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Aboki. I mean, it's actually refreshing to hear that there's quite a lot of investment going on at the state level. And when you think about that investment that you spoke about, the steel plant and the impact on the citizens, and of course the private sector that would actually have some sort of connection to that plant, would actually show that yes, we are on track in terms of government investments that would build the economy. Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Emuma, let me go to you. Based on the Appropriation Act 2023, the government has a budget deficit of 11.34 trillion, which is huge. The finance bill is expected to augment the budget in addressing these revenue challenges. To you, what are the key thrusts? I know this has also been spoken to in the keynote, but I would really love to hear from you, based on your experience and what you've seen. What are the key thrusts of the finance bill? What do you see? How do you see that bill impacting the revenue challenge for the government? And what should businesses particularly prepare for as at the time when the bill will be passed?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Big Bay. Well, I don't know that I have better news than the other speakers have had. If you're looking at things like subsidy being removed, then it can't be very bright. But the finance bill, which hopefully will become an act shortly, I think we shouldn't look at it in isolation. It's the fourth in a series. The first Finance Act was in 2019, then there was one in 2020, another one in 2021. And they are all, the cumulative effect of all of them is what perhaps we should be looking at. Because each one, sometimes what you have is, there's an amendment in a subsequent one, which is correcting an earlier amendment in a previous one. This current one, still a bill, is perhaps not as extensive as some of the previous ones were. So it's just touching a few things here and there. In terms of how it might address the revenue challenges, well, let's look at some basic numbers. I mean, last year, the FRS reported that they hit a record 10.1 trillion in collections, out of which about 4.1 came from oil revenues, and almost 6 trillion from non-oil revenues. The catch there, though, is that the federal government doesn't keep all of this. So if you look at VAT, for example, there was 2.5 trillion, but the federal government keeps that 15% only. The rest goes to states and local governments. So they have to make up for it in other ways. So while the FRS is doing well in collecting, they're not. The money is not staying. Not everything is staying with the federal government, and so the bill will perhaps enhance what FRS will collect, but the extent to which it improves, things for the federal government is not as significant. Now, the changes which have been introduced, a lot of them have to do with cleaning up, previous, shall we say, discrepancies. So there is an increase, for example, or clarification as to what capital gains tax will apply to. So they've now included or made it clear that crypto assets will be included. Although, I mean, the previous language seemed to be clear enough that anything was taxable or liable to capital gains tax. But one area where they have made life easier for businesses is with regard to capital gains tax losses. Sorry, losses. I think that's a contradiction. Capital gains, a loss when you sell the asset. So capital losses. Previously, you couldn't set off losses, from one asset against a loss in another asset. And so, if you lost when you sold one thing, you had to bear the loss. And then if you made a gain somewhere else, you paid the tax. Now they realize that that's not very nice. And they said, okay, if you make a loss somewhere, you can set off against a gain somewhere else. So it sort of equalizes things. And that's a very good development. In a previous iteration, in the 2021 version, they had removed the exemption for capital gains tax on shares. What they've now done is again provided for what you might call rollover relief. So if you are trading in shares and you lose when you sell some shares and you gain when you sell other shares, or you make a gain and you reinvest the gain in more shares, again, you shouldn't pay tax until you exit completely. Again, something that's very helpful to people who are in that business. So it means that your tax burden is somewhat reduced. So those are what you might call bright spots. But then you come to the oil industry. And there, I know, one of the questions we're looking at has to do with the oil industry. And the question is, what they've done there is to say that if you do gas flaring, you pay more tax. The idea is to discourage flaring. And previously that was done by applying a penalty. But what they're doing now is saying now is that it won't be just a penalty for flaring, it'll be an increase in your income tax liability across board. It seems a bit harsh, but to counter that, there is an incentive to develop gas facilities. And if you do so, you will get, investment allowances if you develop gas facilities and the production is above a certain threshold, which is 300 billion cubic feet. So what they're saying is, we want to discourage flaring. On the other hand, if you do something with the gas, we'll give you an allowance, an incentive. So, on balance, if you do what they want you to do, then you'll be fine. Although whether you can finish a project within the fiscal year, I don't know, because this will kick in flaring. Tax will kick in this year. So by next year, when you're filing, if you flared this year, you pay that tax. Whether you can build a facility to utilize the gas immediately within the 12 months is not so certain. They've also made it for oil and gas companies. Previously, it wasn't clear that if you set aside money for cleaning up when you end up, when the well is dry, decommissioning and abandonment costs, that those costs were tax deductible, even though you didn't use the money for another 5, 10, whatever number of years. Because you might be operating now and making profit now, but you want to set aside money which you would use when you shut the well, in a decade or two. And the question is, if you do set aside the money now, can you deduct it as a tax cost? And it wasn't so clear. They've made it clear now that that is deductible, although you must keep the money in a certain manner for that to be recognized. The pricing of crude oil, before you could have, they've amended the provision which allowed you previously to reach an agreement on pricing with the government. Now it's up to the regulator, the NUPRC, to set pricing. So that removes the room for negotiation, but it makes it clearer that once the price is set, that's the price, and you do what you're supposed to do. So that's what they've done with the oil industry. The oil industry used to be able to deduct education tax as an expense. Since the introduction of the PIA, the Petroleum Industry Act in 2021, that incentive was removed. And so when they pay education tax now, they cannot deduct it. With the increase in the education tax, which is being proposed from 2.5 to 3%, it means that the oil industry will be paying 3%, whereas 2 years ago they were paying 0. So for them, it's not just an increase of 0.5, it's an increase of essentially 3% going from where they were 2 years ago. So that's a hit on that industry. They've removed a few small allowances which were available, rural investment allowance, construction allowance, which were available in special cases. Of course, you have the infrastructure incentives which exist today, which is that if you build a road, you can set up those costs against your tax liability. So there's give and take here and there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Emuma. You actually did a deep dive on the oil and gas industry, which is very good. I believe all our participants who operate within that industry would actually feel quite a lot, would have actually got a lot of insights from what you've said. Thank you very much. Because of time constraints, I would also like us to take questions from our participants. But before we do that, it would be nice to get some views from our participants with regards to the specifics that some businesses should start to prepare for, in view of these issues being experienced in Nigeria and other African countries, these macroeconomic issues. So Dr. Ayoteriba, this is going to be for you. What are those specific things that businesses should start to prepare for or continue to do to weather the storm? Just quickly, sir. Dr. Ayoteriba.
Okay. Yes, I'm trying to unmute and also put on the camera. Well, you know that business concerns must be sector specific. And you have, for example, distinction between financial firms and non-financial firms. The considerations are different. And among the non-financial firms, you have, the people operating in, if you like, primary sector agriculture, people operating in secondary sector or industry, and in tertiary sector. Tertiary sectors now are differentiated into two. You have the commercial services and you have the knowledge services. So it depends on which sector you are in. Certain general statements that could be made that applies, is that the global tensions, whether you're talking of the lockdown that Tomi refers to, or the geopolitical tensions, the ripple effects of the war in Ukraine, is that they put pressure on your income statement. They shrink your margins. And for responses, that's one category. The other category is they threaten your asset portfolio. So the responses you can prescribe, for those income statement sort of shocks is the shocks to margins are different at the different stages of the value chain, such that mainstream tend to be where the shocks, constrain margins the most. And you will see companies like Apple have exited their own mainstream. They don't assemble their products, but they remain upstream, they remain downstream, where margins are fattest. And for you to play successfully upstream and downstream, you need to be differentiated. It's very expensive. You need to pay heavily on talent. You need to pay heavily to acquire digital capacity, or even fortify, your places. Two houses, the same, length of compound, one can earn more rent than the other, depending on, how many amenities you had. So usually it's not about running away from costs. It's about strategically looking for which cost to add that helps you to differentiate and charge a premium. And on your balance sheet, the advantage is about what you own and how you can, over time, gain value from the appreciation of the assets that you own. We are in an environment in which, while commodity prices are weakening, global equity prices are trading upward. So the assets that you own is emerging now as a better ticket to wealth than the goods that you produce. And if you look again at, the corporate world, examples of companies who own platforms, for example, who own electronic platforms, where everybody wants to produce anything else must be present. So they assure themselves of wealth, or countries who have fortified their cities into wealth creating centers, compare Dubai and Lagos, London or New York. So owning something that appreciates over time is or innovating, which is, the difference between innovation and production, is becoming a better ticket to wealth than producing something. It's better you own something that all producers pay you, to be able to produce. In a nutshell, that's, I would like to, just leave it there. If there are other questions, I will clarify for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayoteriba. I would say again that we would need to take some questions from the house, from the participants. So there's a question here that I think it's quite popular amongst our participants, and I would like to direct this question to Dr. Yusuf and Ms. Aboki to answer, briefly. What is the implication of the current Naira redesign and scarcity on the economy in 2023? I mean, we've seen the impact, but yes, what are the implications for businesses? So, Dr. Yusuf, you can go first, sir.
Well, the implications are very obvious. We can see that all around us. It has badly affected those in the trade sector, particularly this the retail end, the informal sector, the rural economy, and so on and so forth. So, and given the fact that our trade sector is a very strategic sector, it contributes about 15% to our GDP. It's one of the largest employer of labor. And it's a sector that accommodates the ordinary citizens. That is where most of them make a living. So that is why the badly implemented policy has been such of a big concern to some of us. I mean, you can see it all over the place. The whole place has been massively disrupted. And it has a knock-on effect on those who are even producing, because whatever you produce has to be sold. And if those in the marketplace don't have this means of exchange, because cash is very critical to exchange. And of course, the CBN has grossly underestimated the amount of cash that this economy needs. the policy was not anchored on any data or empirical evidence or even economic theory. But here we are. It is what it is, but the effect has been extremely, extremely bad. We can only hope that very soon the whole thing will be reviewed so that we can move on.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Saboki, what do you think from a government perspective? What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. So I think good policy, wrong implementation, strategy, wrong timing, especially for us in the North. A majority of our people are unbanked, they're financially excluded. A majority of the areas in the North are rural areas where most of our people live with no banks available. Everybody knows today that banks are not willing to go open branches in rural communities. So it will take a lot of investments for us to push people and a lot of awareness to get people to actually accept banking, be financially included and all that. It is also wrong timing because this is harvest time for us in the North. People are on their farms, they have harvested their produce, they are unable to sell because the Naira is not there. Most of the transactions are Naira driven. A farmer, a peasant farmer, farms his 3-4 bags of maize in the farm, and all he wants to do is sell, go back to the market, buy foodstuff for his family, come and feed his family. But the money is not available. So even for, they're losing value in their produce. They're selling below prices of what they should sell, below market value, because they're just looking for anyone to buy. And I hope that government will look at this again, because it is making people poorer and just almost wiping up that retail market here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think one final question for Mr. Emuma. I mean, it's all about people. It's all about people. Nigerians are a little bit disenfranchised at this point, and we've seen the mass exodus that are happening. Advice for our youths. What do you think? What are your views?
Well, I mean, they are looking at the country. They're asking themselves where they are likely to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, looking at the current trajectory. And it's difficult to convince them that given the trajectory they see, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's up to us, those who want to stay and make things better, to show that there is hope. I mean, talk is cheap. You can say to a young person, why are you going to Canada? Why are you going to the UK or wherever else? But he's looking at his circumstances and he's saying, I'm struggling to make ends meet, even with my supposedly decent salary. I mean, if I mean, I don't know who else remembers was working in the 80s. I mean, when I started working then, you could buy a car with 1 year's salary. You see, a Peugeot 504 from Kaduna or Volkswagen from, Badagry, you could buy it with 1 year's salary. Now, very few people can buy a car with 1 year's salary. So how do you, it's difficult to give them hope. It saddens me. I mean, I would love to say to them, no, stay and let's make it better, but it's difficult. That's the truth. I mean, I can't put any gloss on it. You're muted.
Yes, I realize that. Thank you very much, sir. But I'm saying that there is hope in this country, and we should continuously try to, pass on the message that things will get better.
Yeah, no, I'm not leaving. But my young lawyers are, and I don't know. I don't know what to say to them.
All right.
I have to find a way to make it better so that they can be convinced that it's worth staying. That's the point.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think when we listen to all the discussants and everything that's been said today, we can see that, yes, the outlook seems rather bleak, but there are, good news and things can actually do change if we actually put in all these structures and do things right in terms of implementation. And actually looking forward to this transition year, the fact that new government is going to come in, there will be a change since President Buhari will be leaving. So certainly we are all hopeful, and businesses have a lot to look up to and look forward to. So thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. We're out of time. We do have a lot of questions within the chat box, and we promise that between KPMG and IOD, we will take a look at these questions and we respond to the participants that actually asked those questions. You will get our responses because they will be directed to the panelists and they would provide responses that would be shared. We also see that there's been lots of requests for the presentation, the keynotes presentation, and that would also be shared as well. So at this point, I take a break. It's been a pleasure moderating this panel session. Thank you very much once again to the panelists and to all participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Finke, and all the participants and the panelists. Thank you very much. It's been a deeply immersive experience for me, learning so much here. I feel like there should be a certificate of attendance of some sort issued to everyone here so that we can have it in our profiles. KPMG, IOD, 2023 Business and Economic Outlook. But anyway, thank you very much. And once again, our sincere apologies to those that didn't get their questions answered. We will put them together and see how we can get them across to you. So in the interest of time, we'd like to move straight to the vote of thanks, which will be handled by Professor Nat Offor, FIOD Chairman, Research and Advocacy Committee, IOD, Nigeria. Professor Nat, are you there? Can you hear us?
Thank you very much, David. Before I go into the vote of thanks, I think I want to invite the DG of IOD. Perhaps he may have some announcements to make. I mean, this is a very important event, and IOD as a body, we might have some things we want to communicate to participants and the public at large. DG, I don't know whether I have any announcements to make before I give the vote of thanks.
Oh, yes, he's next in line. Yes, he's next.
Thank you very much, Prof.
But go ahead.
We always have announcements to make. I just want to say that I hope the participants have had value for the time they spent with us there this afternoon. For me, it's been a very, very revealing session. I've learned a lot of new things. Some of the edits I've been having since the year started, I think at least I've had some prescriptions on what to do, which I definitely will try, and I hope that goes for everybody. Yes, I do have, for those who are not members of the Institute who are here with us today, this is what we're about, this is what we do. And just go to our website. We have a seamless membership registration process. And once you click, it takes you all through the whole process. What we just be left is the approval from our governing council. So I want to implore you to please try it. You see a section there that allows you to register to be a member of IOD Nigeria. And of course, I also want to inform you that there are, of course, other IOD programs. Our Women Director Development Committee, a very active committee in the Institute, is organizing a fire chat. Yes, fire chat. Or is it fireside chat? I need to get it right. For female directors, but I've always attended those programs. And I can tell you it's not just for female directors. You could learn one or two things even when you are a man. I think that event is holding on the, if I get it right, March, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are holding it on the 8th of March, or sorry, 8th of March. 8th of March. Beg your pardon?
It's 8th.
8th, yes, 8th of March. 8th of March. So I want to also invite you to the program. Of course, I won't go into Prof's area, I will just end it here. But like I said, this is what we do. And of course, we always look, just like we have partnered with KPMG today, those are open for value adding and value enhancing partnership, which we offer to any organization that has the same value proposition like us. We invite you to partner with us to deepen knowledge, to help business, and to create a better environment. Thank you very much. Prof, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, DJ. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you will agree with me that this has been a very insightful session that has extracted or tried to navigate the business environment in a transition year. I have learned so much from this program. But one thing I will just say before I begin to give the thanks is the fact that I think we should stress the impact of technology on businesses in terms of their business strategy, in terms of business processes, and even operations. I say this because if you review what technology is doing now, you'll find that it is changing the game entirely. There is presently this artificial intelligence that is ravaging the space. And with artificial intelligence, you find that even the way businesses are done is taking a new dimension. Also, you find that some businesses, some jobs will become obsolete because the technology is just changing the whole space. And so we should pay attention to that because it is a reality that we must put up with. And then the other issue that also has to do with technology is CBDC. Nigeria is already up front in terms of implementing CBDC with our e-Naira, and other countries are really moving towards that. 2023 is going to be a very prominent year for CBDC because other countries are like having it on their front burner, particularly because the World Economic Forum has given some support. World Economic Forum and IMF has given some support to this. So the impact of CBDC too in doing business, both in Nigeria and elsewhere, will be something that should be considered. And then the final thing still on technology is in terms of talents. With the impact of technology, truly there is a need for unlearning and relearning. So even the talents that we have might not be suitable for the kind of businesses that will be relevant tomorrow. So those who have old knowledge might need to learn the new technology, the new knowledge that will make them relevant for tomorrow. So technology is changing the entire thing. And whether you japa or you are staying here, truly you can be anywhere and still be everywhere. And that is the power of technology. I just felt I should just make this little contribution before I now give the vote of thanks. I will start by saying that this partnership between IOD and KPMG is a very good one. It is something that I look forward to seeing, not just with only KPMG, but with other organizations in the environment, like the DG has implored, because it enables us to really get together and discuss matters of mutual interest. We'll see what has happened today, and it has been very beneficial. We have looked at navigating business environment in the transition year from different perspectives. And that is because of the kind of panelists that is been put together. You know, very eminent and authoritative individuals in their respective areas impacting business environment. So I cannot thank the panelists enough, ranging from Hajia, Umar Yusuf Aboki, to Dr. Muda Yusuf, to Mr. Theophilus Emua, Dr. Ayo Teriba, and then of course, I'm also fair to thank Bimpe Afolabi, from KPMG who moderated the Q&A session. I dare also say that David Opara has been very good in trying to anchor the event. But for me, the real icing on the cake is from Tomi Adepoju, who gave the keynote address that was given by Mr. Tola Adeyemi, who was unavoidably absent. We have had a very interesting session. I'm sure we all have a lot of takeaways from the session that we have had. For me, it has set me thinking deeper than I thought. I had thought that I had done a lot of the thinking, but after this event, I know that the thinking has just even started. More so because I interact with these young ones, as a teacher, I interact with the young ones, and I know that their mindset is not what we think is their mindset in terms of what they want to do and all of that, because of what technology is doing to everybody. So I think we have had a fantastic time. I want to thank the IOD staff too for coordinating all of this. At times you look at the hours that we have spent, just 2 hours, but I can tell you that the planning and arranging of all of this took much more than 2 hours. I would also want to thank members of the committee, the Research and Advocacy Committee of the IOD Nigeria, that are under root auspices that we are having this session. And finally, for the participants, the number has been huge. I want to believe that they are leaving here better informed, and as has been announced, their questions will be answered. So we thank them for their great audience and participation. And with this, I think we can safely say that we have come to a close. Thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. David.
Thank you very much, sir. And I'd like to thank everyone as well, all the panelists and all the speakers, and of course, all the attendees, over 300 that joined earlier. There was a lot of learning from this, and it was a wonderful event, I must say. We had glitches here and there, technology issues here and there, but overall, I thought it was a wonderful event, and we look forward to more of this in the coming, I don't know if it's going to be an annual thing, or biannual, or bi-monthly, or even every 6 months, I don't know, but I'm sure we will find out soon. But we want to see more of this, and I'd like to say a very big thank you again to everyone for joining this event. And on that note, I will close this meeting in addition to the grand closure that we just had. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you and bye everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.